Every leader knows that a thriving organization depends on the energy, productivity, and commitment of its people. But few leaders are able to cultivate the employee engagement and performance needed for this level of success. What's the difference? Positive leadership practices. Welcome to the Positive Leadership Movement Podcast with your host, positive work culture expert, Alex Bratty. Ready to harness the power of positive leadership? Let's dive right in.
Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Positive Leadership Movement. I'm your host, Alex Bratty, and in this episode, you're going to discover why cultivating positive relationships is a crucial pillar in building any high-performing organization. Exactly how you can develop positive relationships and more effective communication in your organization, and how you can leverage this powerful resource to not only increase employee satisfaction, but customer satisfaction and relations as well. All right. Well, as always, we have a value-packed episode for you this week, and it's focused on a topic that is near and dear to my heart because in my work, I have seen such a range of workplace relationships and communication styles, and I gotta be honest, most of them aren't so great. I mean, virtually every organization can improve on the relationships and the communication that they have in their workplace. And so, on the far end of the spectrum, I'm not kidding when I tell you this, I've dealt with workplaces where the leaders joked amongst themselves that there was no point in even learning a new employee's name until they'd been there at least 6 months and, basically proven that they could hack it, as it were, right? Tells you a little something about their turnover and their culture, huh? I've also worked with teams where passive-aggressive was the primary form of communication, and other teams where there was barely any communication beyond the most basic transference of information needed to perform tasks. I mean, there's so many examples I could give you, but the point is that more often than not, relationships and communication get the short shrift in organizations. And yet, the irony is they're the bedrock upon which the organization must build because, as I say over and over again, organizations are made up of people and people need to interact. They need to have relationships and communicate with one another. And when that breaks down, it has a negative impact on performance. Plus, the most tragic part of all of this is that cultivating positive relationships does not take up much time, right? I mean, as leaders, we're always feeling like we've got a scarcity of time, right? Oh, it's going to take more time to work on this, or oh, I want to work on that, but how much time is it going to be? We're always looking for how to eliminate these time suckers out of our schedule, and rightly so. But this positive relationships is something that is done in the moment. It doesn't require any extra time. And so when people create good relationships and quality connections, they're doing it while they're just functioning in normal everyday life. Now, granted, they got to be more mindful and put in a little bit more effort, and we'll get to that in a minute. But this is not something that's going to require extra time for you. And when you do it, there are a myriad of benefits, like everything that I share with you on this podcast, okay? Everything I share with you on this podcast is a proven pathway to better positive leadership and increasing the performance of your people and your organization. And it's all backed up by evidence-based research. So, for example, on this particular topic, on positive relationships, the range of research that there is on this shows that people who have quality relationships in their life, and by this I mean family, friends, coworkers, I mean the whole gamut, okay, at work and elsewhere. These people are significantly more likely to have better physical, emotional, and mental health. They have superior cognitive functioning, right? So their brains are working better and faster than people who do not have positive relationships in their life, right? And specifically in the workplace, people with quality relationships at work are more resilient and better able to recover from setbacks. I mean, how important is that in the workplace? They are committed to the organization and they go above and beyond their basic duties to help others, right? They're more creative in their work and they're more engaged. So this all means at the organizational level, the more quality relationships that are present, the more likely it is that the organization is operating more efficiently, effectively, and performing at high levels, right? Getting to those levels of excellence and high achievement. All that by way of saying positive relationships and quality connections at work matter. In fact, there are two often cited data points by Gallup and this is based on like literally thousands and thousands of interviews and surveys that they have done with employees over many years. And there's two key findings that are relevant to this. One is that people don't leave jobs, they leave their managers or their boss, right? And what is that all about? Relationships, right? And one of the strongest predictors of job satisfaction is whether or not someone has a best friend at work, right? So at the end of the day, so much of what happens in the workplace comes down to the relationships we have with the people we work with day in and day out. And that is why it's absolutely crucial that as a positive leader, you focus on cultivating these quality connections in your organization. All right, so we know why positive relationships are important. Let's talk about how you can foster them, right? Now, the good news is it's not hard to do this. And like I said earlier, it doesn't take a lot of time to do it either. It does, though, like anything else worth doing in life, require some effort and, yes, some mindfulness, right? So I'm going to share with you the 4 pathways that leading positive organizational researcher Dr. Jane Dutton from the University of Michigan has identified and tried and tested, right? And if you want to read more about this, get her book, How to Be a Positive Leader. Actually, it's her and Gretchen Spreitzer edited and compiled that book together. It's a great read. So here are the 4 pathways that Dutton has basically identified and as tried and tested, okay? The first is to respectfully engage with people, okay? Now, this may seem really obvious, but think about it for a moment. Do you always respectfully engage with people at work? I'm going to go out on a limb and say that maybe sometimes you don't, because though that's right, we're all human, right? And we have our off days and our off moments and there's people that just rub us the wrong way and that we find it really hard to, engage with in a respectful way. So this is something that we do need to be mindful of, right? Is to respectfully engage with people. And essentially this entails 3 actions, okay? The first is to be fully present when you're engaging with someone. So obviously, put your phone away, move away from your computer, look them in the eyes when they're talking to you. Essentially, by doing this, you're letting them know that they matter and that you're paying attention to them, right? And in this day and age, when we are so expected to be available and we are so connected and we've got texts coming in on our phone, we've got calls coming in, we've got emails dinging at us, right? It's very easy, especially if someone walks into your office, right? If one of your employees walks into your office, sits on the other side of the desk and wants to talk to you about something, it's very easy for you, and I know I say this because I've done it myself, okay? It's very easy to kind of look at them over your monitor, right? Over your computer monitor. Or it's very easy, your phone is sitting there on the desk and, a text pops up and you want to see what it is. It's very easy to lift that phone and see what's going on while this person is engaging with you. Well, when we do those things, we are unwittingly sending the message that, guess what? You're not that important. These other things are more important. This email coming at me is more important. This text coming at me is more important. And that's just not true, right? The person sitting in front of you at that very moment that you're engaging with, that is what your priority should be, right? And so the very first part of this is to be fully present and to pay attention. The second is to listen. And I mean really listen, okay? Don't listen in order to respond. Listen to understand, right? And again, we all do this from time to time. I'm as guilty as anybody else, right? That you're listening to someone, and yes, you're listening, but you're already formulating in your head what you're going to say in response instead of actually digesting what they're truly saying, right? And so one way to do this is, listen to what that other person's saying and then basically summarize it back to them. Okay. Now, I'm not saying you parrot it back. I'm just saying that, they can give you their information and say, okay, then you would say something like, okay, so, all right, so just so I make sure I'm understanding you clearly, basically you're saying this, and you summarize it in one sentence, right? That's letting the person know that you're listening. And by the way, if you did misunderstand what they said, there's an opportunity to clear it up right there. If that's not improving communication, I don't know what is, right? And so that's the second part, to listen, really listen, and the first is to be present. The third element is to communicate supportively. Now, this really means being mindful of what you're saying and how you're saying it, right? So that it's clear and direct. So the recipient can take the appropriate action with this information, right? So communicating supportively, it also means that you would request rather than demand that somebody does something, right? That you would make sure that they do actually understand, but again, in a respectful way, right? You want it to be clear and direct, so there's no ambiguity here. People, they come away from the interaction feeling like they know exactly what you want or what they have to do next, and there's no muddiness, right? There's no muddiness in the water. And so the other thing there is to request rather than demand, right? So ask somebody to do something, because again, when we're sort of given these demands, like as human beings, we don't respond particularly well to that, right? Like if we receive a request, then we feel more engaged in the interaction, right? So under the heading of respectfully engaging with people, you're going to be fully present, you're going to be truly listening, and you're going to communicate supportively. So you're going to be direct and clear and make requests. All right. So that is the first pathway to fostering these positive relationships. All right. A second pathway is what researchers call task enabling others, right? Like, what a wonky phrase, task enabling others, right? It's really a convoluted way of saying that positive relationships are built when we help others to succeed, okay? That's all it means. In organizations, this is often done through mentoring or coaching programs, right? Essentially, the point here is for people in the organization to support one another in their development and their accomplishments, right? So the point is we're lifting one another up rather than trying to compete or undermine each other, okay? So look for opportunities where you can help others succeed, but also look for opportunities within your teams that they can be helping, the people within those teams can be helping each other succeed, right? Look for opportunities to partner people up so that they're going to lift each other up and elevate each other's performance, okay? So that's a second pathway. The third, probably going to sound like the most familiar. You're probably going to be like, oh, I've heard that one before. But the reason I'm bringing it up is not only because it's, tried and tested, but it's also one of the hardest to achieve, okay? And it's to develop trust. And that can be really challenging in a work environment, right? Because trust requires us to be vulnerable. But a lot of existing cultures are in that realm of like people are competing with one another, they're undermining, even so far as to sabotage, although that is an extreme circumstance, but I have seen it too. So trust can be a challenge in that environment, right? But it can be done, okay? So think about how you as a leader can demonstrate trust and create a space for trust, right? Create an atmosphere of trust, as it were. Because as with all of these things, it comes from the top, right? People see leaders doing and saying and behaving in certain ways, and they model it. Or they think it's okay. That's how it is in your organization. So as a leader, think about how you can demonstrate trust. Now, this is done both by what you're doing and what you're not doing. So for example, in the doing, right, you could demonstrate trust by assigning projects, sharing access and information. And you could demonstrate trust in the not doing by refraining from micromanaging every step along the way, right? And looking over the shoulders of people and checking up on everything that they're doing and, wanting to know the exact hours that they worked yesterday or this week, right? Like those are all things that undermine the idea of trust, right? If you're checking up all the time on your employees, you're basically sending a message that you don't trust them. You don't trust them to do their work, right? Now, I'm not saying that you just assign a project and that's it, wave them off into the sunset and they just do it all on their own and you never check in. Of course not, right? There should be periodic check-ins. There should be times when people are reporting to you, but you don't have to micromanage the whole time. And if you're able to create that environment where you are assigning a project, you're giving someone responsibility to oversee it and to have these periodic check-ins, guess what? That's sending a message of trust. I trust that you are able to do this and that you will follow through, right? So, yes, it can require a leap of faith, but if you're willing to do it, working on trust can go a long way to developing quality relationships and connections. All right, and then the fourth, so that was the third one, trust. The fourth pathway that Dutton's describes is to play. Yes, play. We all need it, right? We all know. I mean, there's so much research out there that when we engage in play, it makes us more creative and innovative, right? But the other effect of play is that we feel happy during it. And when we experience those happy feelings, we are actually more open to new relationships and interactions, okay? Now, before you panic that I'm saying that you have to just put a bunch of ping pong tables or foosball tables or a ball pit in your office, okay? It's not all about that. Yes, you could do that, okay? Certainly, you could take it literally and put play items in your office for people to engage in. But if that's a bridge too far for you and the culture of your organization, that's okay. It can come just as easily in the form of fun team building activities. Footnote on that, please make sure they are fun, okay? I mean, the number of times I've heard about, we had this, team retreat. It was supposed to be so much fun, but we were taken out into the wilderness and it was like a survival weekend and about half the people ended up crying and wanted to go home. Yeah, no, that's not fun, okay? If half your team is crying and wants to go home, I can tell you that's not fun. So when I say fun team building activities, put a little thought into it. Think of something that actually will be fun for the people in the team, okay? Not just for you, okay? But for the team. So you can do it that way, or you can have informal social gatherings or celebrations, right? I mean, even just having some kind of happy hour, having some kind of cookout at the office, right? Or maybe you can't do that, right? Maybe you can't cook out, but you know what I mean. Think of opportunities to bring people together where they're having fun and they're able to play. Now, another warning on this, okay? If you do have an incredibly competitive environment, which I got to tell you, one of the organizations that I used to be with, that I used to work with, they have a very competitive environment. And so they used to do an annual picnic, okay? And at that picnic would be a baseball game. Well, can I just tell you that more often than not, that baseball game degenerated into a disaster because people were so competitive, right? And, people were crying, people got their feelings hurt. people were offended at some of the things that happened, and other people were like, oh, but it's, we have to win. It's a game. Like, we have to win this. Our team is better than your team. And so it did the exact opposite of what it was intended. It was intended to bring people together to have fun and play. Instead, it pitted them against each other and created wedges where there were not, and deepened the wedges that already existed, right? Because invariably, people who already didn't quite like each other ended up on opposite teams, right? And we're trying to beat each other. So again, when I say this, please put some real thought into how do we create an environment that actually is fun, that isn't going to have an adverse impact on what we're trying to do here, which is cultivate positive relationships, okay? So those are the 4 pathways, all right? Just to recap. 1, respectfully engage with people. 2, what's called task enabling, essentially set people up for success. 3, develop an environment of trust. And 4, play. Create some fun. Have people interact in a fun and playful way, and one that truly is fun and playful, all right? Now, you might be thinking, well, yeah, those all sound like great ideas, but how could I get my organization to really do this, right? To actually prioritize relationships? Because, of course, we're always really focused on the work and not necessarily the relationships, right? Like, how many times have you, because you're in a rush, you've walked in and without even barely saying, hello, how are you? You're like asking for the latest report, or, who's called, what clients have called in today, whatever it is. You didn't even take the time to just sort of stop and say, hey, Jenny, how's it going? How's your day? Great. Hey, so what's the latest report? It takes literally 30 seconds to do that. Do you think it's going to help a positive relationship? Yes. It's the small things, right? And we need to remember this, that it's important to prioritize relationships. So here are some pointers on this, again, from Dutton. Okay, she very generously lays out how we can do this. And I've used several of these strategies and techniques with a lot of success in organizations. So first, you could actually institutionalize the notion of cultivating positive relationships, right? And you could do this by building award or reward structures, such as, some companies have peer recognition of excellence awards, right? Where essentially peers are nominating each other for a job well done, or for, doing something really well in the workplace. Maybe it's not actually tasks specific, but it could be, say, hey, I want to nominate Sally because she has been so supportive of John this week while he was out, and she covered all of his projects while he was gone, right? I mean, this is how you foster positive relationships. So in an example like that, somebody nominates Sally. So let's say it's, David nominates Sally for covering for John. 3 people right there, do you think their relationships are going to be improved, just those 3 people? Yeah. And also, when other people see that that's being recognized, that these positive relationships are being recognized, it is like a ripple effect, right? It's like, oh, that's really neat. And they want to, nominate other peers for different things that they have done, whether it be specific to a work task, or perhaps just good citizen behavior, as it were, in the workplace, right? Also, you can tie incentives to team performance as well as individual, right? So, many organizations have incentive structures for individual performance, and that's great. But you can also have an element be tied to the team. So guess what? It means that the team, everyone on that team, has a vested interest on getting along and performing to a high level, right? The other thing you could do is to think about your hiring and onboarding process, right? So some organizations assign a mentor or an onboarding buddy to new hires so that they quickly develop quality connections and relationships are prioritized instead of just throwing a boatload of information at them, right? Like most onboarding processes is, hi, welcome. Okay, let's get you set up with your email and your this and your that and your health benefits. And here's your 401k. And now we're going to, start training you on exactly what you need to do. Of course, all of that is really important. Do not get me wrong. However, it could be done in tandem with having an onboarding buddy or mentor who is immediately connecting this person, both to them, obviously, but to others in the organization so that relationships get fostered from the get-go and they're a priority in the onboarding process. And then third, here's another idea, and in my opinion and my experience is actually the most important, and I alluded to this earlier, is that leaders are the role models for cultivating positive relationships, right? They need to, which is you're a leader, you need to engage in the practices that we've just discussed, right? Respectfully engaging people, demonstrating trust, setting them up for success. And in times of crisis, being there for people who have been there for you. For example, after the September 11th attacks, the president of Reuters America, which was located in Manhattan, so it was, affected by, obviously, those attacks, he engaged in regular and personal communication with his employees and checking in with them constantly as they were working through a lot of that pain and suffering in those difficult times, right? And he was checking in with them on two levels, professionally, yes, but also personally. Because, of course, people working in that area were, if they personally weren't impacted, they knew somebody who was, right? Everybody was going through a very difficult time. And so just demonstrating that you care and that you're respectfully engaging, even in those times of crisis, goes a long way. And I mean, that really is, in a situation like that, that is positive leadership in action right there. I mean, do you think those employees felt valued, cared for, respected at a time when they need it most? Yeah, you betcha. And do you think they'll ever forget those actions of that leader? Probably not, right? Now, I mentioned at the top of the show that we'd also talk about how you can leverage this resource of positive relationship just beyond your employees, right? So up until now, we've been really focused on that. We've been really focused on how you can foster positive relationships in your organization, with your employees directly and then within teams and between teams. But you can also use these principles that we've talked about to develop quality connections with your clients as well, which of course is going to generate greater customer satisfaction, referrals, loyalty, repeat business, right? So let me give you an example of that. One company that specializes in development, energy, and construction projects has done exactly that. They're called Weston Solutions. And they actually train their project managers on how to cultivate client relationships using some of the techniques we've discussed on today's show. So being open and present, right, in all client communications, being honest and dependable, so they're building that element of trust, right? So those are some of the items that we talked about today, that respectful engagement, that developing trust, right? All of those contribute to the client connection, right? And the relationship there, the respectful engagement and the building trust. They also seek to connect with clients outside of work for more personal interaction. And I love this. They ask a key question of their clients, and they train their project managers in this. And this is the question: what would a home run be for you with this project? Like, what would it look like? What would a home run, like if we were to hit this out of the ballpark using, the sports analogy, but if we were going to just like be totally excellent at this, what would that look like for you? And they have the client describe that, and then guess what they do? They go do everything they can to meet or exceed what that client describes. And so, simply by doing that respectful engagement and building trust, right? And they're asking their questions. Remember, one of those elements of respectful engagement was requesting, right? Like asking questions. If you apply that to the client context, it's asking them, what do they really want and need, so that you are then equipped to go deliver and over deliver on it, right? Now, what has this focus on client relationships done for Weston? As they describe it, there have been significant financial benefits for the firm, right? And the reason for that was increase in repeat business and a reduction in having to renegotiate prices when they were renewing contracts. Also, customer loyalty to them as a sole supplier. And for the project managers, they said it makes the work more enjoyable and engaging, right? So sounds like Weston got themselves their own home run by focusing on positive relationships. So not only are their project managers happier and more engaged and obviously therefore doing a better job, but they've created this world where their clients are so connected to them, have such a quality relationship with them that they retain these clients over and over for many years. And that, of course, is an excellent thing in your organization to have that loyalty, right? So there you have it for this week. We've talked today about the importance of cultivating positive relationships in your organization. And as always, we didn't just talk about why it matters, which of course is super important, but we also got into the nitty-gritty of how do you actually make this happen. And we did that by sharing empirically validated and proven strategies. As a positive leader, you have multiple pathways available to you to start building quality connections in your organization. Respectfully engage with others, set people up for success, build trust, and play. Yes, have some fun with this. And look, like all the strategies I share with you on this show, you don't have to try them all at once, okay? I know that that's overwhelming. If I throw 4 things at you and say, go do them all now, you're not going to do any of them. I know this, okay? So just pick one that seems like a good fit for you and your organization. Get your kitchen cabinet on board with it, and then try it out and watch for the positive ripple effect throughout the organization. Believe me, you will start to see results very quickly. All right, thanks for joining me on this week's Positive Leadership Movement episode, and thanks for inspiring me every day in your quest to be the best positive leader you can be. It's my honor and privilege to support you in that journey. And please join me next week when we're going to dive a little deeper on communication. Okay, we touched on it a little bit during this episode, but it's such an important topic. There's so much to share in it. And I got a fabulous question from a listener asking, okay, how do you give bad feedback? Like if somebody's done something wrong and you really do need to address it, how do you do that as a positive leader? Right. And I think we run into this conundrum a lot because we think positive means I got to be positive all the time. Right. And so we're going to address that specific question. Like, how do you give bad feedback or negative feedback in a way that's consistent with positive leadership so that, yes, the person understands that they did something wrong, they need to improve, but at the same time, you don't diminish the relationship, you actually can even strengthen it, okay? So that's what we're going to get into next week is communication and specifically how you as a leader can give negative feedback in a positive way and get the results that you want from that it's not just glossed over and, rainbows and unicorns, okay? All right, so, and if you have a question about positive leadership, write in, email us at questions@positiveleadershipmovement.com, and I'll answer it in a future episode. For now, this is Alex Bratty signing off and thanking you for being part of the Positive Leadership Movement.
Make sure you subscribe to the show. If you like this episode, please rate and review. If you want to get more from Alex, check out Happiness at Work, where she provides leaders with a proven path to cultivate a positive work culture that increases performance, productivity, and profitability. Go to happinessatworknow.com. Join us next week and harness the power of positive leadership for your organization.